Yes.
You brought the note to John?
I don't remember. I tell you, you just, that
You
morning
remember how you got the
so
note?
chaotic.
You don't?
I don't remember exactly, but
Well, it was.
I started screaming, there's a note,
I got nightmares in my head, I fear. Thoughts build up until I can't feel. My mind fills up into a creature, and it haunts me somewhere much deeper. I got nightmares in my head, I fear.
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most Van Gogh voice in true crime. Anyone have any idea what that means? In the previous analysis, we dealt with the irony of Larry King bringing up polygraphs right out of the gate, which is about lie detecting. And one can't help wondering if that was Larry's first questioning. What was he thinking? Did he think his interview would solicit honest answers or not so much? The strange thing is, immediately after introducing this idea, the Ramseys seemed to offer funny answers to seemingly straightforward questions. Patsy, for example, didn't think they were ever suspects. John said, well, he seemed to murmur in 2000, when this interview was conducted, that the incident occurred on December 26th. He didn't seem to be sure when Larry was referring to, but he didn't seem to take the lead in that respect either. But then 16 years later, he insisted that it happened on Christmas night. Now, in this analysis, we're going to speed through 5 more funny, peculiar responses. And so, who or what would you say we are dealing with here? Is it a case of
sneaky little hobbitses?
Or is it a case of
Just have to make up your own damn mind to either accept what I'm going to tell you or reject it.
Or is it more
Trust me?
I trust you.
Before we get to that, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do. If you're finding this analysis interesting, insightful, worthwhile, please like, share, leave a comment. You can also hit the thanks button, and let's get started. So, number 1, we were reasonably successful.
Let's give us a little history. You were in what business in Boulder?
We were the computer distribution business. We sold computer products to resellers who then sold them to users.
Very successful, right?
It was reasonably successful.
Reasonably. Even by Boulder standards, John was rich. John was a multimillionaire. His net worth was estimated at $6.4 million, but this is in 1996 dollars. He was so wealthy he was able to pay for different lawyers for himself, his wife Patsy, his son Burke, and I think he even got a lawyer to represent his first wife, Lucinda. They were so wealthy they had their own pilot at their beck and call and flew in a private plane. John also owned a boat called Miss America.
It was reasonably successful.
Interestingly, the ransom note writer also thought the Ramseys were just reasonably successful, which is why they asked for a reasonably low ransom amount. They could easily have asked for $1 million. They asked for 10% of that, because I guess they thought the Ramseys were reasonably successful. I'm sure many of you know that John's business passed $1 billion in revenue, that's billion with a B, in late December, just days before the incident, a milestone that led to the company Access Graphics appearing in the local paper and then throwing a huge party and John being voted Boulder's Entrepreneur of the Year. In Detective Linda Arendt's report, she also described John's business as very successful. Less than a year after John Bonet's death, Access Graphics was sold to General Electric for $2.8 billion. Would you say that's reasonably successful? That brings us to number 2. What happened that day? And so once again, John kind of seems to be confused.
What happened that day?
December 26th.
6th.
This is the second time in less than 5 minutes that John seems unsure what date Larry was referring to. 16 years later, he was pretty sure it wasn't the day after Christmas. That brings us to number 3. We were planning to leave. Well, what preparations did they make? Were they going to leave the alarm off? Were they going to leave the broken window, which John knew he'd broken? Were they going to leave that broken? And listen to the response. The question is, what happened that day? Notice that John doesn't actually answer the question. He doesn't answer what happened that day, except to say, we were planning to leave. I mean, isn't the answer, what happened that day, John Bonet died?
What happened that day?
December 26th.
6.
We were planning to leave for Charlevoix, which is, we have a summer cottage up there. We did have. We were going to rendezvous with our older kids for
So do you notice John doesn't really answer the question? He also describes their home in Charlevoix as a cottage. Has anyone seen that house? I'm not sure if I would describe it as a cottage. I think it's more a mansion, and a large mansion at that. And now on to number 4. What happened that night? What's the first thing you remember, Patsy? And so because John doesn't really answer the question, Larry turns the same question over to Patsy.
What happened that night? What's the first thing you remember, Patsy?
The first thing I remember is waking up.
Now, of course, this presupposes that Patsy was ever asleep and woke up. It is kind of an interesting thing that she says, what's the first thing you remember? Well, the first thing I remember is I woke up. Would anyone really say that? And what's also interesting is she repeats the question and shakes her head when she says waking up. Now, Patsy then takes us downstairs and takes us into things that she was packing for the plane, and then the note, and doesn't take us to John Bonet's room. Now, let me ask you, if you were asked this question, let's say you were in a car accident and someone asked, what do you remember about that day? Would you start with what you packed to put in the car, or how you walked to the car? Or if someone close to you died and you were asked what you remembered from that day, would you start with how you woke up and where you went through the house and perhaps that you were going to make breakfast? Where would you begin to answer that question? Would you answer it, do you think, in the way that Patsy did? For me personally, and this is just my opinion, the biggest whopper out of this set of 5 is number 5, you brought the note to John, and Patsy's response to this.
quickly.
Yeah.
You brought the note to John?
I don't remember. I tell you, you just, that
You remember
morning
how you got the
is so
note?
chaotic.
You don't?
I don't remember exactly, but
Well, it was.
I started screaming, there's a note,
What's significant here is that Patsy is asked, did you take the note to John? And Patsy essentially says, I don't remember. You don't remember giving John the note. And if you deal with their own narrative, in their own narrative, I mean, they do remember because they talk about it. John comes downstairs. He's apparently in his underwear and he sort of crouches over the note on the floor. But basically, if you read between the lines, John doesn't ever touch the note, doesn't handle it, and neither does Patsy, which is pretty incredible. And the fact that no fingerprints were found on the note confirms, or seems to confirm, that neither of them handled the note. So you are left a ransom note, but you don't touch it. Do you agree in terms of these 5? I think this is the biggest whopper of all. Again, you would think after finding the note, anyone would pick it up, read it, based on the contents, go to John Bonet's room, look for John Bonet, perhaps go to Burke's room, then take the note to John, hand it to him, have him read it, and then continue looking through the house. Does Patsy ever pick up the ransom note?
You brought the note to John?
I don't remember. I tell you, you just, that
You
morning
remember how you got
is
the
so
note?
chaotic.
So you actually hear Larry King saying, wow, you don't remember you got the note. Surely that would be the first thing you'd remember, right? Especially if the note was legitimate. So I'm not going to take it further than that, but do you notice that we've actually dealt with 10 whoppers and we've just passed 5 minutes and 2 seconds of this 39-minute interview? Quite interesting. I think that's enough, right? 10 whoppers in 5 minutes. That's enough, or Do you think I could maybe go on for maybe 1 or 2 more Whoppers? What do you guys think? Thank you for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.